Hello, everyone. How's everyone feeling? Yeah? That's awesome. So, today we're going to be talking about designing for context. And before that, I am Fatema Ismailjee.
And I am Hannah Ndandala.
So, in the next 1 hour, we will be talking about designing for context, designing with your users, how it is done, why it is important, some hands-on practice, so everyone will have to be moving around a bit, creating some interesting things, and then, of course, there'll be time for reflections, questions, and answers.
So just before we get started, on a scale of 1 to 10, how creative are you feeling? Just shout out. Who said 10? I feel like there was a 10 over here. Then we have high expectations for your group, okay? If you're feeling a 10, we've got high expectations. Who is just feeling 5? Okay, then I guess we have high expectations for everyone.
Yay!
We'll be expecting some very creative solutions in this workshop. So today what we're talking about is human-centered design. And human-centered design is a process of creating a product or a solution which puts the end user at the center of it all. And so because you're designing for this end user, there's certain things that you need to think about during the process of design. So the first one is to empathize. So you need to know who you're designing for, and you need to think about how they feel, how they think, and how they view the world around them. So a good example from my time at Ubongo was we were trying to design a new way of teaching letters to children aged 3 to 6. So as you can see, I'm not a child aged 3 to 6. So for me, that means getting into the mindset of a small child and thinking about how do they see the products that we give to them. The next stage is to define the problem. So as I just said, we were designing a video for teaching letters to young children. But if I say teaching letters, what does that really mean? If you know the alphabet song, you know that some children here can sing the whole song, and they get to the middle part and they're like LMNOP. They don't even know any of those letters individually. So when we were thinking about designing these videos, we were thinking, what exactly do we want children to be able to do after seeing this video? And we said that to us, that meant they would know the letter name, like letter A, letter B. They would know the letter sound, like A or B. And they would also have an idea of the letter shape, so kind of drawing the letter. So the next stage is to ideate. That means coming up with loads of different ideas that could be possible solutions for your problem. Because if you come up with just one idea and that idea doesn't work, then you're way back at the beginning. So what we did at Ubongo was we got into groups like this, and today we know that there's people from all different backgrounds. So we did the same at Ubongo. We had people from the studio, we had graphic designers, we had animators, we had the finance team, and we all got together to come up with ideas for these videos. And the point of doing that is that you also get fresh perspectives on the problem. So once you have all those ideas, you need to test them. There's no point coming up with a great idea and thinking it will work and spending a lot of money producing it and then finding that actually kids just don't really like that. Maybe you chose the wrong character. Maybe you chose the wrong music. Maybe you chose colors that are not so popular. So part of testing is to step back from who you are, especially for many of us here as an adult, and to get in the mindset of the person you're designing for. What does this thing that I've come up with mean to you? Because maybe it means something different to you than it does to me. And then once you have your feedback from that, the next stage is to prototype. So prototype is generally making that idea a little bit more, let's say, better quality. So you maybe are putting a little bit of money in here, maybe you're spending a bit more time making it so that you have a good idea of what your final product would look like. And then it doesn't stop there, because even once you have your prototype, you need to go back and test it again. So human-centered design uses this cycle in a repetitive way to make sure that never at any point do you stop thinking about the user of your product.
All right, so here's an example of why designing with your users, for your users, is very important. So I hope everyone is looking at the screen right now for just 2 minutes. So yeah, as we were making our new website for one of our shows, Akili and Me, we decided to have all the elements included in that, and one of them being art. So, of course, we thought we'll make icons for it, and through that, the kids can enter the world of art. And what comes to our mind? Like, the first thing that comes to our mind is a paint palette and a brush, right? Because that's art. But yeah, at this point, all I can say is that it was great that we designed with our users, because we went to them asking what they think of this. Would anyone like to guess what they thought of the before designing with kids icon? Any guesses? Any guesses? Sorry? It was a crate. Okay. Any other guesses? Okay, so I'll tell you what it was. The kids thought it was a bomb. It was a bomb. Now imagine having that on the Akili and Me website, and the kids are entering the world of bomb. That wouldn't be very nice. So that's when we decided that we will ask children what art is for them, and we asked them to draw certain things for us that means art to them, and that's when we got our icon that is currently on the website, which is after designing with kids. And now, after having spoken a little about what human-centered design is and going through the example, we have an activity planned, as we said earlier, and Hannah will be introducing the activity to us. So go for it.
Thank you. Okay, so we would love to give you the freedom to just go out into the world and design whatever thing you want for whichever user you want. But obviously, we're a tiny bit restricted because we are all in this big room and we don't have all the time in the world. So we've kind of narrowed down the scope a little bit of this workshop. And what we want to focus on today is how might we inspire children to care for the environment. So obviously, environment, climate change, and protecting the environment are big issues globally at the moment, part of the SDGs. So we want you now to start thinking about how you might encourage children to care for the environment.
Okay, so the way we'll be doing this is the table that you're seated on will be your group. And through that, Hannah will take you through the first stage of the design process.
Okay, so we mentioned that human-centered design places the end user at the heart of the design process. So what we're talking about there is designing for real people. And sometimes when we say real people, that means different things in different contexts. So as you might be able to tell, I'm not from Tanzania, I'm from the UK. So if I were in the UK and I were designing something to inspire children to care about the environment, I'm going to be thinking about how do children see the environment here? What are the things they already know or they're exposed to? For example, if you're in a city like London, there's a lot of big city parks. But you don't really have that in Dar es Salaam. So you're not going to be using that as part of that child's daily life. So when you're thinking about empathizing with them, in your groups, decide who is this child that you're designing for? Is it a child in Dar es Salaam? Is it a child in Morogoro? Is it a child in Njombe? Is it a child in Mwanza? Are they rural? Are they urban? Think about who is the child that you're designing for and try and empathize with that child. What do they see in the environment in their daily life? And what we want you to do here is think about their real experience and their real problems. So Fatema was telling me about a time recently when she did some research in Nairobi in a slum, and they were talking about the environment with children sort of aged 8 to 12. And the children were using trash to burn. And maybe they were burning it for something like cooking, for fire, for their cooking. And if you ask them about the environment and how they take care of it, they would say that burning this trash is good for the environment. And to me, I would think, okay, but it's not good because you're creating smoke that's polluting the air. But for those children, they were saying, no, but we're cleaning up the environment. We're getting rid of the trash, and then you can't even see it anymore. And Fatema also told me that then when you ask them, okay, but what about the smoke? Is that good for the environment? As far as they were concerned, when that smoke has disappeared into the sky, it doesn't exist anymore. So you need to think about their real problems. So for these children, it was a problem of not only getting rid of the rubbish in their environment, but also what about the fuel they'll use to cook? If they don't burn plastic, what are they going to use? So when you're thinking about your solution, it has to fit the situation that your user is in. You can't give them a solution not to burn anything because then they won't be able to cook. So what we want you to do now in your groups is think about who your user is. What type of child are they? Obviously, it would be great if we had those children here and you could talk to them. But because we don't have that, we would like you to imagine what kind of questions would you ask this child to learn more about their perspective on the environment. We want you to imagine listening to their thoughts and feelings. How do you think they feel? How do you think they think about this issue? And then finally, we would like you to try and put yourselves in their shoes. What type of solution would you want? So we'll give you some time now, maybe 5 minutes, and in your group, identify who this child is and discuss their thoughts and feelings on the issue of the environment.
So I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you've been able to empathize. Yeah. Maybe we can go to the next step now. Can I please have your attention? So the whole point of this process is also that we don't take too much time. I know this is very little time, but for the time that we have, we will have to move a little faster. So now that you have gained empathy, you have what challenges your audience or your users face, you know what their feelings are, or how they react towards certain things, what are their behaviors influenced by. Now there's a sheet on the table. It has different aspects. There's pain points, there's feelings, there's tasks, there's influence. Has everyone seen it? Yeah, so from what we have spoken about in the empathizing phase, let's have a user persona, and this is what is going to guide you. So you can name your user whatever you like, and from what information you've gathered in this previous phase, write down all the things that would fall under these different things, because this will guide you to getting down or to narrowing down the problem statement. I hope that's going well. I hope we know what the tasks are, what our users' feelings are. Now there's another sheet on the table. It says redefine the problem. So if we can all take a look at that. It's called redefine the problem. Does everyone have it on their table? Okay, so for that one, now what we're going to do is, now that you have more, you have written down the user persona, now that you've written down who your user is, and you know more about them, you will you can follow that and say, for example, with the example that Hannah just spoke about, we can say, how might we inspire children or influence children to not burn plastic to beautify their environment? So that is an example. Now, with whatever that you have discussed, you can follow the same thing. So you can just briefly write down what the needs of your users are, and then after that, go to redefining the problem.
just to add something, there was a group over here, and one of their problems was understanding the importance of insects in the ecosystem. But you might say that that's very broad. Like, what is the importance of insects in the ecosystem? So when we talk about redefining the problem, we want you to really zoom in on, if you only have one sentence, what is the outcome you want to aim for? What should they know exactly about insects in the ecosystem after they use your product or your intervention? Kwa sasa tunataka, hata kwa sentensi moja, mnaweza kusema, sisi tunalenga kufanya nini haswa. Kwa kama ni changamoto kubwa kama kulinda mazingira, haswa unataka waweze kufanya nini? Ni kuweka takataka kwenye sehemu inayotakiwa kuwekwa, au ni kuokota takataka, au ni labda kutojisaidia nje. Kwa ufikiria haswa tunataka wafanye nini?
Wote tunaendelea, maendeleo endelevu, kutambua utu wetu, afya bora kwa kila mmoja, tuitunze dunia yetu, uhai wetu wa mazingira, tuna malengo sisi watoto, ndoto zisizo na kikomo.
Okay, so hopefully you've come up with a kind of problem statement. Lengo lako ni nini? Kufanya nini haswa? So you've already identified the child that you want to help, okay, that you're designing for. And you've identified what you want to do at the end. So now what you need to think about before you start designing is, what is this journey from what they see now to what they're like at the end? So, for example, we had an example from the group at the back over there. They said they were designing for a 4-year-old who lives in Mbezi Beach, and she sees a lot of dry trees. So maybe something they want to teach her is the life cycle of a tree, so that she understands, why is this one dry and why is this one has lots of green leaves and flowers and stuff. So you have to think about, what does that journey look like, from only seeing dry trees to understanding the life cycle? What are the things that you need to help her understand along the way? Because if we're not on the journey with our user, then we run the risk that we create something, and when we give it to them, it doesn't work. So now, before you start designing, we just want you to think about this journey. How are you going to guide your user to the end point? Yeah, so sasa tunachotaka ni kwamba kila meza inaweza kachagua mtu mmoja au watu wawili waje kwenye haya maboksi ya cardboard, wachukue labda vitu viwili, vitatu hivi na kurudi navyo, halafu mtatumia vitu hivi kutunga kitu ambacho kinalenga kutatua tatizo ambalo mmechagua. So unaweza ukadesign kitu chochote. Labda inaweza kuwa kama kitu cha kuchezea ambacho kitawasaidia kufundisha lengo lako. Inaweza kuwa kama poster hivi, au hata kama mmekosa wazo, labda unaweza ukachukua inspiration kutoka kwa Ubongo na kudesign labda mhusika kama Akili, tumemdesign Little Lion. Kwa unaweza ukafikiri mhusika gani atamhamisisha huyu mtoto kubadilisha tabia au kujifunza kitu. So karibuni kuchukua vitu vyenu, halafu anza kufanya hiyo design process. Maana yake haziko sawa sawa. Tunaonyesha kwa alama hiyo, kama mama mwenye njaa sana atakula kikubwa nachoona. Baba ula na bakubwa, uchoma ndogo na mkia. Baba ula na bakubwa, uchoma ndogo na mkia. Moja ni kubwa kuliko sifuri, sifuri ni ndogo kuliko moja. Baba anakula moja, anachoma sifuri. Mbili ni kubwa kuliko moja, na moja ni ndogo kuliko mbili.
we're going to go to the next step, which is testing it out. So over here, why don't you just turn right to your group, turn to your right, and the group that is there, you can test this solution out with them. And so what you can tell them is who your user is, and after that, let them tell you what they think of your solution.
Yeah, so the idea here is that we're getting to this testing stage. So we've come up with some solutions, but what we need to do now is know how are these solutions perceived. Yani watu wanaonaje suluhisho hiyo. Kwa hiyo ni kwamba nendeni kwenye meza nyingine na waulize sasa umeonaje wazo letu. Kwa hiyo labda unaweza kumwambia mnalenga kumsaidia mtoto gani, halafu umuonyeshe au mwelezea suluhisho ambayo mmetengeneza. So turn to another group, show them your solution, your product, or explain to them what you want to do, and get some feedback. See what they think about it. So we'll give you some time to do this. So you need to engage with another group.
Koba, unajua nini? Watu wanafikiri eti ili ufanikiwe lazima ufaulu. Lakini siri ya mafanikio ni kufeli. Tunajifunza kupitia kushindwa kwetu. Ndipo tunapoanza safari ya mafanikio. Umeelewa eh?
Weka malengo kwa mstamilivu, mstamilivu. Hata ukifeli kwa mstamilivu, ndio siri ya kufaulu. Weka malengo kwa mstamilivu, mstamilivu. Hata ukifeli kwa mstamilivu, ndio siri ya kufaulu. Malengo madogo na makubwa, usiache kuyaweka. Ukisifiwa endeleza, jifunze unapokosa.
Hello. I think we're enjoying this session, finding out what our users think. Yeah? Awesome. So I hope you've learned a lot about your solution. I hope you know what works in your solution, what could you change a little depending on how your user has taken it. And usually, in the next stage of this is from what you've learned about, from the feedback that you've gotten from your users, you just come back and then try to put all of that to practice. So you make another prototype, and then you go back and test it and see if that works. All the changes that you've made, have they worked, have they not worked? So yeah, that's the process, and you've gone through it.
Yeah, you should be really proud of yourselves for the ideas you came up with.
Wow.
Give yourselves a round of applause. So now, if you could just take a seat, because what we would really like to do, and something which is really important for this type of design process, is to reflect. Yani kufikiria mmejifunza nini. Kwa tunaomba mkaeni keti ili tuweze tukajadili kuhusu tulichojifunza sasa. So just to get us started, before we hear your feedback, put your hand up if when you tested your product, you were told that you should change something. Put your hand up if the feedback you got was, oh, maybe you should change it. Nani aliambiwa wabadilishe kitu kwenye walichotengeneza? Najua nyie mliambiwa hivyo kwa sababu nilikuwepo. So I'll just give you an example. I hope you don't mind. But they designed a really cool dustbin to encourage children to put their rubbish in a bin. But then the feedback they got when they tested it was, okay, but you're designing for a 5-year-old. Mnalenga kumsaidia au kumhamisisha mtoto mwenye miaka 5. Kwa bora mweke kitu ambacho kinavutia. Yani labda rangi zinazong'aa. So they said that you should do something which will really attract children. Because if you're aiming to help a 5-year-old, you need to draw their attention to the dustbin. I don't know if you've seen the dustbins they have on the street, but they're not particularly interesting or inspiring. They don't really have a message. And if you're 5 years old and you can't read the words, weka mazingira safi, then it doesn't mean anything to you. Okay? So be honest now. Who else had some feedback? Who else had a suggestion? Wow. I guess everyone did a great design.
You nailed the process the first time.
So now we would like to hear your opinions. how did you find this process? Did you find it easy or hard? Would anyone like to say? You found it? It was hard. And why was it hard?
Get exactly what they feel. So you design something that is better.
Exactly. So one of the reasons it was difficult was because we didn't actually have children that you could ask. And as you just highlighted, this is why human-centered design, you have to be willing to go to where your user is. You can't expect to understand the daily life of someone who lives in a village in, I think you guys, did you say Tabora or something? You can't expect to understand that child's life if you bring the child to Dar es Salaam. You have to go there to see how do they live. Anyone else? How did you find it?
Hello, Deborah from Dalberg. So something else that we found difficult, at least from my perspective, was that we're really narrowing down on the problem. But then in the end, you ask yourself what is happening on the other end of the value chain. For example, if you're talking about proper disposal of trash in a dustbin, but then what are you going to tell your kid about where that trash goes in the end of the day, in terms of where, like what's the proper dump site supposed to go to and what do they do to the trash there? So it's like focusing on one problem, but then thinking about the whole ecosystem at large, it's challenging.
Exactly. So part of that is because nothing exists in isolation, right? So all of the problems we have as humans exist because they interact with other things in our environment. Even, for example, coronavirus, I'm sure we all know about it. But this is not just a problem on its own. It's also because we travel, because of globalization. So this highlights the fact that although human-centered design should be specific in the change you want to see, the only way to make that change really effective is to think about the big picture. And maybe that means going to other partners, encouraging them to do something similar. What you'll see in Ubongo Kids episodes is that there'll always be one main goal of what this episode is meant to teach, but it will try to be taught in context of what are the other things you need to know to learn this thing.
Now we have last 5 minutes remaining, and we would like to move to questions and answers. So does anyone have any questions for us?
On the first time when we didn't have the materials, it was very difficult for us to think what we should do with it. But when we are given the materials, so it was very easy for us to manipulate. Okay, it was easy for us to manipulate. But without the materials, it was very difficult. What should we say? What would we write? So that was the problem. But when we had the materials, it was very easy for us to. So we learned that sometimes it's very easy to do things when you have the material rather than just thinking without anything.
That's a really good point. And actually, when we were designing the alphabet segment for Akili and Me, at first we didn't have materials. So what we did, because it was going to be a video, was we literally just acted it out. So maybe I'm pretending to be letter A, and I just need to tell them, I'm letter A, this is my house or something. And sometimes in human-centered design, you don't have the materials you need, which you probably noticed. Some of you didn't have scissors. Or glue. But the nature of this process is that you do what you can with what you have, and you try and learn something from that experience before you start spending a whole ton of money building a machine that doesn't even work. So you're completely right. It's difficult, but at the same time, that pushes us to be more creative.
So going off the ecosystem point, something else I would like to know is in terms of focusing on early childhood development, how do you kind of track that impact and make sure it goes on with the child as they get older? So basically, how do you work with partners? How do you make sure the development that they have when they're younger, how does it play out when they're older? And how do the resources kind of match in to make sure that keeps happening?
Is your question to Ubongo specifically? What is Ubongo's process? Or do you mean like how would one do this?
Both.
Okay. So I don't know, would you like to answer on behalf of Ubongo? Or?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So in terms of the impact and how we go on with it, is that we start focusing on one age group, and then we carry on with that, and then we do some studies, with a professor from a university outside, and they carry out studies on what the impact is like of the show of the different elements of the show. So for example, Akili and Me, which is for the younger, for 3 to 6 year olds, how the literacy rates have improved for those children, and then carrying on to like a few years after, how the same has affected them and how it has helped them.
And in terms of, in a broader sense, I think what you're touching on is the importance of development, child development from even before birth right through to the end of your teenage years, that it should be viewed from a holistic perspective. And that itself is what makes it so important that different development partners and different NGOs try and work in harmony with one another, because it's very difficult for one organization or one group like Ubongo to be an expert on everything from the kind of early term of pregnancy right through to the teenage years. You do need help from other groups and other experts. So I think that just goes to show that if we want any solution to be effective, we need to be supporting each other, giving feedback to one another, and trying to find where are the gaps that I could help that you can't help at the moment.
Yeah, and with that, I would just like to say that, this process can be used in everyday life, in whatever you're doing, at home, in your workplace, wherever you are. Just try and get a bit of feedback from the people that you're working with, from the people that you're around, and then you can see how your solution just blooms and how it really works for everyone around.
Yes. Tunataka kuwashukuru tu na kuwakumbusha kwamba tulichofanya leo unaweza ukafanya kwenye kila sekta ya maisha. Yaani hata kama una design poster ya kuweka bafuni kuwahamasisha watu kunawa, najua kunawa muhimu. Sasa waulize, umeonaje hiyo poster, inawavutia? Inafanya kazi? Kwa sababu labda umeweka tu maneno ambayo hayavutii. Kwa hiyo tunawaomba kwamba muendelee kutumia mlichojifunza leo katika kila kazi mnayofanya. Asanteni sana.
Thank you.